We begin the Gemara on the Daf Tzadek Amud Aleph at the beginning of the Amud. So here the Gemara brings another raya to the discussion that began on Daf Peites Amud Beis between Rav Chisda and Rabba regarding the question whether Bezdin or Chachamim, that is, have the power to institute something that uproots a Isser min HaTorah. And Rav Chisda said they have the power. He tried to bring a few rayas to this, but the Gemara refuted all of the rayas. Now it brings another raya. Tashema, I'll bring you a raya to this. So it says here in a Braisa, Ochal Truma Tmeya, a person went and he ate Tomei Truma that belongs to a Kayin, of course. So now the halacha always when you eat from the Truma of a Kayin is that you have to pay him back that Truma. You have to pay him back the Truma plus a fifth, and what you pay him back from your Chulin will become now his Truma. So, Mishalem Chulin Tahirin. You ate Truma from the Kayin that was already Tameh, but when you pay him back from your Chulin, you pay him back Chulin, which is Tahir. Shilem Chulin Tmeim. If you pay back the Kayin with Chulin that was also Tameh, so Simcha Mishum Rab Meir, Simcha says in the name of Rab Meir, B'shaygeg, if you gave the Chulin to the Kayin to pay back, and it was Tameh, but it was B'shaygeg. You didn't realize it was Tameh. Then tashlum of tashlumin. Then the payment is accepted. You thought it's tar, so it's accepted. B'mezid, if you paid him back b'mezid tamei chulin, ain't tashlum of tashlumin. Then there's a knas, then the tashlumin is not accepted. So this is all a knas midrabanan, because we learned already this before in the previous amud, that when it comes to the mitzvah of truma, of giving truma min HaTorah, you could be mekayim the mitzvah with giving tar produce, tamei produce, there's no difference. The Gemara brought before a pasuk that if you taira min hara ala yofe, from a bad quality on good quality, the truma takes effect. But over here, however, you're causing the kayin a loss by giving him tamei chulin, so therefore there's a knas for this, that the payment is not accepted. The Chachamim say, echad zeh ve'echad zeh, whether it was b'shaygig or it was b'mezid that you gave this tamei chulin, tashlum of tashlumin, what you paid is accepted. It belongs now to the kain. It becomes truma, and v'chayzer u'mishalem chulin tahirin. However, you're going to have to give again a second time truma from chulin tahirin because what you gave to the kain was a loss. That's the lashon of the Braisa. Now on this the Gemara says v'havinam ba. The question was asked on what it says there in this Braisa. So what did it say here? Rab Meir said b'mezid ain't tashlum of tashlumin. If you're paying the kayin, so what happened is, again, you ate from this kayin his tamei truma, and you're paying him back with your tamei chulin. So it said if you paid him back with your tamei chulin b'mezid, ain't tashlum of tashlumin. This payment is not accepted. Fragt the Gemara, why not? Tovei olav bracha. This is a perfect payment, and you should be benched for this. Why? You ate from the kayin something that's not fit for him to eat in times when he's tamei. Even when he's tamei. Truma, that's tamei, you're never allowed to eat. Doesn't matter. Even when the kain's tamei is not allowed to eat from it. The only thing you can use it for is as fuel for a fire. And instead, what did you pay him back with? V'kum mishalem lei, and you're paying him with tamei chulin, which is midi. That's something. The kachazi lebi made tumasai. A kain can eat it in the times that he's anyways tamei. It's not truma, it's chulin which is tamei. So if the chulin if the truma that is did not take effect, so it's chulin that's tamei, and the kain can eat it in the times when he's tamei. So what you paid him back is very useful for the kain, even more than what he had before in his tamei truma. So why is it not good? That's a question on this Braisa. V'amar Rava, v'amri la kidi. Rava said, others say kidi said, it's the name of a chacham. Chasuri mechsiri v'hachi ketani. There's something missing here in the Braisa, and this is how you have to learn the Braisa. Achal truma tmeya. You ate from a kayin his truma, which is tamei. Then mishalem kolduhu. Then yes, you could pay him whatever you wish. You could pay him tamei chulin, tar chulin, because like the Gemara just pointed out, even if you give him tamei chulin, it's better, it's more useful than the tamei truma that you ate from him. Achal truma taira. However, if what you ate from the kayin is his tar truma, which he can eat. So now, mishalem chulin tahirin. You're going to have to give him, to reimburse him, you're going to have to give him chulin that's tahir, that he can use it just as much as he can use his tahir truma, that is. Shilem chulin tmeim. If you pay it in chulin, which is tamei, so here, because you're giving back the kayin, so even though min HaTorah, this should take effect, because as I mentioned before, there's no difference between tamei or tahir truma min HaTorah, but you're causing the kayin a loss. You can't use this tamei truma as much as you could, the tahir truma. So therefore, because of this loss, so Sumcha says in the name of Rav Meir, b'sheigig tashlum of tashlumin. If it was done b'sheigig, you didn't realize that the payment is accepted. But b'mezid, if you intentionally are giving him tamei chulin, and you're intentionally causing the kayin a loss, ein tashlum of tashlumin. So there's a knas that Chachamim were geyser that this tashlumin should not be accepted. The Chachamim say, bein b'sheigig, bein b'mezid, tashlum of tashlumin. That either, whether it was b'sheigig that you gave this tamei chulin, or it was b'mezid, the tashlumin is going to be accepted, meaning it will become truma that will not belong to the kayin. But v'chayzer mishalem chulin tayrin, you're going to have to pay give a second time of chulin, which is tar, because you caused this loss. So you're going to have to give a second time. So now we have the brisa. We understand what it says in this brisa. So now the question is as follows: So in this case, when you're reimbursing the kayin with tamei chulin, and minat Torah, as I mentioned before, this payment is accepted, perfect. There's no distinction between tamei or tar truma for the kayin. The imekadesh puhu, and therefore so much so, when the kayin receives this truma, it's his, and if he wants to use it to be mekadesh isha, a woman, mekadesh bo kayin isha tafsila kedushin minat Torah, it's his truma, and the kedushin should take effect. And the Rabbanan here come along and impose a knas on the one that gave this tamei truma, and they say, ein tashlum of tashlumin, that this payment is not accepted and it will not be truma. The kasharin an eishes ish lalma, and they're allowing, if so, an eishes ish, that minat Torah is an eishes ish because it is the kain's truma. And Chachamim are saying, no, it's a knas. There's a knas here, and this truma is not accepted, and therefore through this potentially they could be allowing an eishes ish to get married to anyone else. So how could this be? So here we see Rav Chisda is bringing a proof from here that Chachamim have the power to uproot an Issa min HaTorah. Says the Gemara, no, there's no raya from here, because we have to understand what Rav Meir said. When Rav Meir says that it's not accepted, my ein tashlum of tashlumin, the Kama Rav Meir, when he says that this payment of this tamei truma or this tamei chulin that is not accepted, the Boilim Mede Shlumi Chulin Tahayrin. He didn't mean that Truma will not be Truma because it was Tamei, so and therefore it just goes back to being Chulin, and therefore you have this problem here that it's the Eishes Ish will be allowed even though it should really be Truma. It's accepted as Truma, it becomes Truma. But all he meant is that you're going to have to pay again, you're going to have to give Truma a second time of Chulin Tahayrin. Frag the Gemara, if that's what Sumchis in the name of Rab Meir was saying, Ihachi Sumchis Hainu Rabbanan. So Sumchis in the name of Rab Meir is saying the same thing as the Rabbanan. In the Braisa, the Chachamim are saying that the Truma is accepted, but you're going to have to pay a second time. Now you're saying that Sumchis in the name of Rab Meir, when he says Ein Tashlum of Tashlum, and it also means the same thing, that it's not accepted, meaning that he's going to have to pay a second time. So what's the difference between them? And says the Gemara, the only difference is Amar Rav Ache Berei Ravike Konsu, Sheigig, Atumezid, Ikebenaya. The only difference is whether the knas goes so far to be applied even in a case of a Sheigig. According to Sumchis in the name of Rab Meir, the knas is only if it was done intentionally, b'mezid, but b'sheigig we do not impose this knas. And Chachamim are saying, even b'sheigig, that is, we apply the knas, and the truma, this tamei chulin will not be accepted, and you will have to pay again. That's the only difference between them. But nobody says that this truma will become completely chulin again if minat Torah really it is accepted as truma. So therefore there's no raya from here that Chachamim are uprooting an isser minat Torah. Tashema, so Rav Chisda tries to bring another raya to his opinion that Chachamim could uproot a isser minat Torah. Dam shenitma v'zarkai b'sheigig, blood of a carbon that became tamei, and it can't be used anymore to do the avodah with it, to sprinkle it on the mizbeach, but it was done b'sheigig, so hortza, so it's accepted. The kapara that has to be done is accepted. B'mezid, if it was sprayed on the mizbeach b'mezid, then loy hortza, then it will not be accepted. That's the halacha of the brayse, and that's the Gemara explains here. V'navahacha the midairaisa artsuye marza minat Torah, when blood of a carbon becomes tamei, and you sprayed it on the mizbeach, whether you did it b'sheigig or b'mezid, minat Torah, this zrika of the dam of this carbon is accepted. Why? The Tanya, we learned in the Braise, Alma hatzitz meratza. The Torah says that the tzitz will help appease, meaning that the tzitz will help appease when a carbon is being brought with tumah. So in what case is this? Al adam, whether it's the blood of the carbon, vala basar, whether the meat of the carbon, vala chelav or fats, shenitma, that became tameh, bein b'shegig, bein b'mezid, whether it was done not knowing this halacha about tumah, whether b'mezid, bein b'inus, whether by force, bein b'ratzen, ratzen is the same thing as mezid, bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibur, for a carbon yachid or a carbon tzibur. And so in all these cases, the tzitz that the kohen wears is meratzah. It makes all these karbanis, all these parts of karbanis that were brought b'tumah acceptable. So therefore over here, minat Torah, there's no difference if the blood was spread in the mizbech, b'shegig or b'mezid. Either way, it's accepted. Chachamim came and gave a knas to the person and said that, and the Gemara continues, V'amri Rabbanan, the Rabbanan said, Loi hortza, that if you spray this blood b'mezid, it should not be accepted. But if so, the problem is v'kahadar ma'ayil chulun la'azoreh. So now minat Torah, the carbon that was brought, the blood that was sprayed in the mizbeach was accepted, and therefore the bailam, the owner that brought this carbon, he's already forgiven. He doesn't have to bring another carbon. But the Rabbanan are imposing a knas and saying that the zrikas adam is not accepted, and he's going to bring a second carbon. Minat Torah, the second carbon he brings, which is unnecessary, will be chulin ba'azara. It's chulin bringing into the Beis HaMikdash. You're not allowed to bring chulin into the Beis HaMikdash and shecht it, and for the kohanim to eat it. So therefore, we see Chachamim can make a knas that uproots the Issa Minat Torah. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, so Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina answers, "My loy hurtza." When it says here that when he sprayed the blood that was tamei b'mezid, so it's not accepted. The Ka'amar that the Brisa says lahatir basa ba'achila. It only means regarding permitting, causing the other meat, the leftover meat from the karbanis that are not burnt in the mizbeach, that the kohanim usually eat, and they could only eat from that meat after the zrikas hadam on the mizbeach is done properly. So here, when the blood was not sprayed properly, it was done betumah, b'mezid. So over here, chachamim were geyser a knas that the meat of the carbon that the kohanim eat will not be able to eat. Avo bailam is kapru, but the kapara for the bailam is fully accepted. And therefore, they will not bring a second carbon. So there's no issue of doing an isser of bringing chulin ba'azara. Frak Gemara, but even after this, sof, in the end, there's still a problem here. Kamis akra achilas basar. By saying that the kohanim can't eat from this meat because the blood was sprayed when it was tamei b'mezid, they are uprooting the mitzvah of the kohanim to eat from the meat of the carbon. Oksiv, and the pasuk says, that they eat the kohanim eat from the karbonis, that then they'll have a kapara through this. Melamed, this pasuk teaches me, kohanim oichlim, that the kohanim eat from the karbonis, ubailim is kaprim, and the owners of the carbon, they receive a kapara. So we see that a part of the mitzvah is that the kohanim have to eat from the carbon, and here we're preventing, because of this gzeirim midrabana, this knas midrabana, we're preventing the kohanim from doing their mitzvah. So we see chachamim could uproot a mitzvah minat Torah. Amalei, so the Gemara answers, shev al taisa shani, uprooting a mitzvah minat Torah, which does not say, chachamim are not saying to you that you should go ahead and do an action to uproot a issa minat Torah. Rather, what chachamim are saying to you is, sit and do not fulfill the mitzvah in this case because of our knas. In such a case, chachamim have the power to do so. However, to say that chachamim have a power to impose a knas when they institute something, that it will come and tell you to go actively do something which is a issa minat Torah, for that chachamim do not necessarily have the power. So that's a different kind of a case. Shev al tasa. There's a very well-known taz about this answer of the Gemara regarding Shev al tasa, and this is sort of the conclusion of the Gemara. When it comes to a Shev al tasa, chachamim could uproot something minat Torah, but not with a kum v'aseh if they're actively telling you to do a isser. So the taz says that there's another limitation, even by a Shev al tasa, when they're just telling you sit back and don't do this mitzvah minat Torah. If there's a certain case where chachamim, where the Torah that is befeirish mata something, explicitly mata something, there, even as a shev al tasa, chachamim will not uproot that is, a clear heta that the Torah says. The Gemara continues, Amalei, so Rabbe, Rav Chisda that is, tells Rabbe, Boi lo isuvech. I wanted to ask you questions from many more places where you see that chachamim could uproot something in the Torah. And the cases are as follows. Adl. First, the case of an adl. So Rashi explains the case of the adl this is regarding a person that was megayer on Erev Pesach, and he had a bris, and he's able to bring the carbon Pesach. But Chachamim were geyser that any person that's megayer on Erev Pesach, you can't bring a carbon Pesach for him, he has to wait until next year. it's like he's like tamei, and he has to wait 7 days until they spray on him and he becomes tahir. So this is the Gzeirim D'Rabbanan, which prevents him of fulfilling a mitzvah min ha-Torah. Chacham uprooting the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. That's one question Rav Chisda says you wanted to ask from. Hazah. Another case is the case of Hazah. If Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos and a person's tamei, and all you have to do is spray the waters of the paradum on him and it'll be tar to bring the Korban Pesach. But there's an Issa D'Rabbanan to spray the waters of the paraduma on Shabbos. And Chachamim don't allow him to do this in order to be able to bring. They uproot the Korban Pesach. The third case that he wanted to ask from, the Ismail. Case of Ismail is bringing a knife for a bris on Shabbos. And to carry the knife, even to carry it through courtyards and various different places that are only Asam D'Rabbanan to carry, you're not allowed even to fulfill the mitzvah of Milah on the 8th day in its time. So we uproot the mitzvah of Milah. Sadin b'tzitzis, a sheet which is a linen sheet to put in wool tzitzis in it, which is shatnez. Min ha-Torah, shatnez, the mitzvah of tzitzis and shatnez is totally allowed. But Chachamim were geyser that you shouldn't have tzitzis shatnez, so they're uprooting the mitzvah of tzitzis. The kivsei atzeres, the karbanis shlamim, the 2 lambs that are brought on Shavuos, which are brought together with the breads that are brought in the Beis HaMikdash on Shavuos. So Rashi says what this means is, if they were brought shaloi lishma, so Chachamim were geyser that the blood should not be sprayed in the Beis HaMikdash for them. The zrikas adam should not be done, even though the zrika of the dam is only, the isser of doing this zrikas adam is only midrabanan. But it's a shvus. But nevertheless, Chachamim said that they did not allow them to uproot. They did not allow to spray the blood, and because of this, you're not going to be able to do the mitzvah of zrikas adam and burn the parts in the mizbeach and all the other things all the other parts of the mitzvah of these kvasim that have to be done. And shofar, and then of course the well-known thing regarding shofar, that when Rosh Hashanah falls out in Shabbos, Chachamim were geyser not to blow shofar, uproot the mitzvah of shofar. And the lulav, and Chachamim uprooted the mitzvah of lulav when the first day of Sukkot falls out in Shabbos. So we see many scenarios where Chachamim have the power with their gzeira to uproot a mitzvah min ha-Torah. These are all the questions that Rav Chisda says he wanted to ask Rabbi from. Hash to the Shana now that you answered, Sheval Taise, Loi Meker. So now that you're telling me that if it's all the Chacham are saying is sit back and don't do the mitzvah min ha-Torah, this is not considered that you're actively uprooting something min ha-Torah, so therefore Chacham have the power to say this. So kulanam yishev tasin. All of these examples that I wanted to ask from is also not uprooting a mitzvah min ha-Torah actively, rather Chachamim saying that you should sit and not fulfill this mitzvah. So from here, there's no questions. There's one of the cases actually which Taisus addresses, the case of tzitzis, which seemingly is uprooting a mitzvah min ha-Torah actively because the person is putting on the tzitzis without the tzitzis in it. A 4-cornered garment without the tzitzis, he's putting that on. That's doing an action which is uprooting a mitzvah min ha-Torah, bekom vaseh, not just by not doing anything. But Taisus says the mitzvah of tzitzis is not when you wrap yourself in this garment. The mitzvah of tzitzis is when you're wearing it. Once you're already wearing it, then there has to be the tzitzis on this 4-cornered garment. And at that point, if you don't put it on, it's only a sheval tasa. Chacham is saying that you don't have to put it on, and therefore they have the right, they can say this, and not uprooting it, bekum vaseh. Tashema, so Rav Chisda tries to bring a raya from another place. Elov to Shmon. The pasuk says by a navi, you should listen to what he tells you. What does this mean? Even if a navi comes and tells you to transgress on one of the mitzvahs of the Torah, like the story with Eliyahu bar Carmel in the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, when karbanis were only allowed to be brought in the Beis HaMikdash. It was not a time where you could bring a carbon on any bama, and yet Eliyahu Navi brought a carbon on the Har Carmel. So you see that we listen to the Chachamim, or we listen to a navi at that time. You have to listen to a Navi according to the call of the hour, whatever he tells you to do. So we see a Chachamim or a Navi have the kayach to uproot a Issa min ha-Torah. In that case, it's the Issa of Shchutei Chutz, which is a Issa of Lav, of Kares even. And it says the Gemara, Shani Asam. That case is different. Chsiv, Elov Tishman. There the Torah says, listen to the Navi. That this is part of the mitzvah to listen to the Navi. And therefore, a Navi you have to listen to. But not necessarily is this applied to the Chachamim in general. Why can't we learn from here that this would apply to all Chachamim as well? So Taisus explains this question. What's the question of the Gemara? Well, how would we compare this that the Torah clearly says regarding a Navi, that you have to listen to him, that we can learn from here for all the Chachamim as well, that you uproot what it says in the Torah? So Taisva says, because the truth is, even a Navi cannot uproot a mitzvah min ha-Torah. A Navi doesn't have such a koyach b'chlal. The Navi can say things that will strengthen Torah, but he can't uproot anything in the Torah. So the fact that the Torah allows a Navi to do this means that this is part of what Torah allows. This is not considered to be uprooting anything in the Torah. That a Navi could say, if he saw certain things to uproot what it says in the Torah, and therefore maybe we should learn from here that this applies to any of the Chachamim as well. And says the Gemara, Migdar Milse Shani. Over there, for Chachamim to make a fence, in that case Eliyahu Navi, to make a fence, to do something in a case where the Yidden were already serving Avodah Zarah, that's different. That's the story over there when all the Yidden was serving the Baal, the Avodah Zarah, and Eliyahu Navi wanted to finally uproot them from that Avodah Zarah. Over there, it's allowed to uproot a mitzvah min ha-Torah. So what this means is, as the Rishonim explain, in a case where Chachamim want to make a knas or a gzeira because they're concerned about something that could happen in the future if they don't make this knas or gzeira, there, not necessarily the Chachamim have such a koyach to uproot a mitzvah min ha-Torah or a lav or a issa min ha-Torah bekom v'aseh. But over here in this case, once it's already a situation where it already happened, many Yidden are serving Avodah Zarah and he's trying to uproot them from this, over here the Chachamim have that koyach. So there's a big discussion in the Rishonim whether this is actually applicable also regarding the Chachamim making a Gezeira in a case of Migdar Milsa. Is this the Maskana? Could the Chachamim make a Gezeira in a case where there's something already that people are stumbling upon or people already are not keeping? Could Chachamim come and make a Gezeira for this, even to uproot a mitzvah min ha-Torah, and even to do it in a permanent manner? I mean, the story with Eliyahu Bar Carmel was a one-time thing, as the Gemara before said, Lefisha. So there's a big discussion in Rishonim about that. Another ayah the Gemara tries to bring Toshama bitloi mevutl. This is a halacha of bitl haget. So min ha-Torah, the din is if you send a get, if a person sends a get to his wife with a shliach, so until the get doesn't arrive and given to her in her hands, he can be mevatel the get. He can come along and say, I annul the get. I don't want it to be effective at all. But now midrabanan, Rabbi Gamliel Hazakin was misakin that you can't be mevatel a get once it's left the hands of the person and if it's not in front of a bezdin. Because then nobody knows you mevatel the get. She thinks she's divorced and she ends up getting married to someone else and she's really an Eishes Ish. So there's a big problem. So therefore Chachamim were guys not to do so. Now what happens if the Mishnah there says bitloi, if he went ahead and nevertheless was mevatel the get, even though Chachamim were guys not to, when he was mevatel the get not in front of the bezdin, mevatel. So then b'diyavad, if he did so, the get will become annulled. Divrei Rebbe, this is Rebbe's opinion. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, you can't annul a get if it's not in front of the bezdin. You can't add any conditions that you had before, because if you can, what power do the words of the bezdin have? If the bezdin was masakin, that you can't be mevatel a get unless it's in front of them, so then you're going to say b'diavad if you did so, that your bittul, that you annulled the get, took effect. So then what power does the words of the bezdin have? The Gemara, in this case, the midoraisa bottle get. Min ha-Torah, if you mevatel get, whether in front of a bezdin, whether not, the get is bottle. Umishum ma koyach bezdin, only because of this svara, that we don't want the words, the takana of the chachamim, to be considered something that no one is interested in or feels necessary to listen to. And because it is, chachamim said that even b'diavad, the get will still be a good get. So therefore it comes out that kasharinon Eishes Ish la'alma. Min ha-Torah, the bittul of this get took effect. It's not a get anymore, and she's still an Eishes Ish. But midrabanan, they come and say that no, the get is still going to be a good get, and now midrabanan, they're taking an Eishes Ish and they're allowing her to get married to anybody else. So we see Chacham could uproot bekum v'aseh a issa min ha-Torah. Answers the Gemara different. When it comes to this case, Man de Mekadesh, anyone that makes a Kiddushin that marries his wife, Adaita de Rabbana Mekadesh. The Kiddushin is being made on the condition that the Chachamim agree to this Kiddushin. And therefore, in such a case, when it comes out later that they don't want that this get should be bottled, they want the divorce to take effect, what really happens is, Va'afki inu Rabbana l'Kiddushin. The Chachamim are retroactively uprooting the Kiddushin in the first place, and that's why she will not be an Eishes Ish. Even if it's true that the get, min ha-Torah, is not a get anymore, but the whole, or is a get rather. Again, even though midrabanan it's not a get, and she's still an Eishes Ish, but Chachamim uprooted the get retroactively. They uprooted the Kiddushin, that is, retroactively. That's how this works. Amalei Ravina Rav Ashi, so Ravina asks Rav Ashi, Hot Tainech the Kaddish B'Kaspa. That would be true if he's Mekadisher with money. So we know, but when it comes to money, we can say that Chacham, if his person gave money to his wife for Kiddushin. But Chacham have the power regarding money, as we learned before, Hefker Bezin Hefker, to say that you gave it for Kiddushin, but we say that retroactively that money will be considered to be just a gift, and therefore there's no money for Kiddushin here. So that uproots the whole Kiddushin retroactively. But Kaddish, Bibiyah, Ma'yikele Meimar, one of the ways to be Mekadesh, a woman, is through Biyah, through having relations with her. And he had relations with her for the purpose of Kiddushin. So how are Chachamim going to change that retroactively, that there should be no Kiddushin here? And says the Gemara, for this as well, Chachamim have a power. Shiur Rabbana lebilasai bi'ilaznus. Chachamim, even though he intended that his biyah should be for the purpose of Kiddushin, but since he's doing it all al daita de Rabbanan, that Chachamim agree to what he's doing. So if the Chachamim now say that they don't agree to this marriage to be in effect, so retroactively, the biyah, l'shem Kiddushin, Chachamim will say, will be considered a biyah znus, a biyah without Kiddushin, and therefore it's uprooted retroactively. Tashema, another ayah, trying to bring another ayah here, the Chachamim have a power to uproot a Yisam and Atayra. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said, Shemaiti, I heard, Shebezdin makim v'oinshin, Bezdin could hit, they can punish, Shaloim and Atayra, even if it's in a case where a person in Atayra does not deserve this punishment, and v'loi laver al divrei Tayra, not because we're looking to be over on what Torah says just to give a person an einish, ela lasas yagla Torah, sometimes to make offense for things of Torah. So Chachamim, if they see fit, they can punish as they see for any person that deserves it. And the Gemara brings a story here. There was a story with an individual. He was traveling, riding a horse on Shabbos, bimei Yevanim, in the times of the Yevanim, in the times of the story of Chanukah. So this is only a Isam D'Rabbanan. In Atayra, there's no Isam to ride on a horse on Shabbos. But he was desecrating Shabbos publicly, and v'hivul, Bezdin, they brought him to Bezdin, v'sakluhu, and they stoned him to death. Not because he was Machal Shabbos min Atayra and was really Chayiv Misa min Atayra, ella rather Shashat Tzricha lekach. There was a time when many people were being Machal Shabbos, and they were trying to bring back the Kedusha of Shabbos, so therefore Chachamim saw fit that this person should be Chayiv Misa. There was also a story with another individual. He had relations with his wife outdoors under a fig tree, exposed in a way that's not sneeze. And they brought him to Bezdin, and Chachamim gave him Malchus. Not because Minat Torah he's fit for this. That time there was a pritzus, and Chachamim saw fit to give this person Malchus, so people should be careful. So what do we see over here? Chachamim are uprooting the Isser of Leisirtzach Minat Torah. You're not allowed to hit another Yid. But in a case where Chachamim feel fit that this person deserves this in order to make sure that others don't do the same because of the situation that's going on, they can uproot the Isser Minat Torah of Leisirtzach and so on. And says the Gemara, similar to what it said before, Migdar Milsashani. When it's already a case when many are already being Mechal Shabbos, or many are not acting Tzniyazik, so therefore Chachamim need to put up a new fence here to bring people back to keeping Shabbos and so on. In such a case, yes, Chachamim could uproot a mitzvah min Atayra even by actively uprooting it. But it's time for Chachamim to make a takana or a knas because of a concern of what may happen in the future that we don't see from here that they're allowed. Now going back to the Mishnah. It said over there regarding the case in the beginning of the Perek when a person left overseas and his wife went and got remarried based on the words of an Eid Echad, and then the husband comes back. So the Mishnah said very many different things that apply to this woman. And one of them was that not the first or second husband, if they are a Kayin, are allowed to be metamet to her if she dies, like it is usually with the case of a wife of a Kayin. From where do we know this? The fact that he can't be metamet to the second wife is simple because she's not really his wife. But from where do we know that he can't be metamet to his first wife? Because the pasuk says, you can be metamet to your wife that's close to you. And the master has said about this pasuk, Sheidai is a person's wife. Now the pasuk there says, a husband should not become tameh amongst his people to become desecrated. What does this mean? Sometimes yesh bal shemetame. Sometimes we allow a husband to become tameh to his wife. to bury her. V'yesh bal she'ein mitame. But there is a case where a husband should not become tamei to his wife. And when is that? Ha ketzad, what's the difference here? Mitame ole ishtoi ksheira. He's allowed to become tamei to his wife if she's his kosher wife. Then that's allowed. But if it's his wife, which is possible, then he's not allowed. So over here, even the first husband, this wife, once she had a relation with the second husband, and she's considered to be a zayna, she's not a isha ksheira anymore. So even the first husband, which is really her husband, cannot be mitame to her. Then the Mishnah said regarding both of these husbands, the first and the second, none of them will get any of the items that she finds, like the halacha usually is regarding a wife. So the Gemara explains, what's the reason why Chachamim said that usually any items that a woman brings home that she found will belong to the husband, so that he shouldn't have any animosity towards his wife. She brings him home different things, so that helps for this. But Hacha over here, where we want the second husband for sure to let her go, and even the first husband to let her go, as it says, both have to let her, send her away and give her a get. So we're not interested in keeping the peace between them. Let there be some fight between them, and he will let her go and he will send her away. Also, when it comes to her income, so the first or second husband do not get any of her income. Why not? Why does usually a husband get the income of his wife? Because she's eating from him. He's feeding her, so in return he gets her income. Over here, as the halacha is, she does not get fed by any of these husbands. So therefore he does not get in return as well any income. Then it said that a husband, even the first husband here, cannot annul any of her vows like a husband usually can. What's the reason? Because why does the Torah say that a husband usually can annul his wife's vows? In order that she should not become despicable in his eyes. As Rashi brings, the halacha that a husband could annul his wife's vows applies to those kinds of nadarim when she's causing an affliction to herself. She says she's not going to bathe or she's not going to adorn herself. So therefore, those things we allow the husband to annul, those vows. But Hacha over here, since we want this husband to send her away, tizgana v'tizgana, let her be despicable in his eyes and she'll send him away. He will send her away. Then the Mishnah said, if she was a Bas Yisrael, so because she went and she had a relationship with a second husband, she becomes a Zaina, so she's possible to Kahuna. This should be obvious. She's a Zaina, and we know a Zaina is possible to marry a Kayin. And says the Gemara, the next case is really the Chiddush here. Bas Levi min ha'maisa itzrich. This, that a Bas Levi in this situation will not be able to eat from Meiser, that is the main Chiddush here. So now, is that really true though? Uvas Levi min ha'maiser mi mifsala b'znus. A Bas Levi, so is it true that she will not be allowed to eat maiser because she went and had a relation with a second husband and this makes her a zoina? Does that not allow her to eat from maiser? Vatanya, we clearly learned in the Braisa, Levia shenishpis, a Bas Levi that was captured, or shenivala bilas nus, or she had a relation with someone, a bilas nus. Noisten la meiser can still be given to her vaycheles, and she can eat from this meiser. Rav Sheishes, yeah, usually that is the case, that even a Zaina could eat from meiser, but in this case, kanasa. Here there's a kanas, she didn't make a proper investigation before she went to get married to her second husband, so this kanas does not allow her to eat from her meiser. Baskayin minat truma. So then it said also that a baskayin can't eat truma. Says the Gemara, what's the chiddush here? Afilu b'truma derabanan. Even truma that's only midrabanan, she can't eat either. As Rashi says, truma minat Torah is not needed for the Mishnah to say. If she's a zayna and she can't marry, she's possible to a kayin, she can't eat truma as well. But the chiddush is even truma midrabanan. Then the Mishnah says, ve'ein yoshav shalzeh ve'yoshav shalzeh. The yoshim of the first husband or the second husband will not yarshin ksubasa, will not get her ksuba. So the question here is, ksuba my avidata. What's a ksuba doing here? The Mishnah before said that this woman does not get any ksuba money, not from the first or second husband. Rav Papa answers, ksubas benin dichrin. This is referring to the ksubas benin dichrin, a ksuba that goes to her children which are zecharim. As Rashi brings, this is a special condition that's put into a ksuba in a case where a woman gets married and she writes into the ksuba that my children, the zecharim, should get the ksuba money. And that's even in a case where she passes away before her husband, so usually she doesn't get any ksuba. She passes away before her husband, the husband gets remarried to another wife, and then the husband passes away. So now those banim zecharim, the children from the first wife will get the ksuba money of their mother, even though their mother passed away before the father. That's a special takana of ksubas b'nin dichlin written into the ksuba, and that's what the Mishnah here means, that over here in this case, the Yarshim will not get any of this ksuba. Frek the Gemara Pshita, this should be obvious as well. It's one of the conditions written into the ksuba, so if none of the details of the ksuba apply, this shouldn't apply either. And says the Gemara, no, it's not so obvious, because Ma'ad Teime, I would think to say, Lidi da of the Isura, for her, she did something forbidden, she went and had a relationship with a second husband while she was really an Eshesish, Konsua Rabbanan. So for her, Chachamim gave her a knas that she doesn't get any of the things in her ksuba. But Lazara, Lekonsua Rabbanan, not necessarily should we apply that knas to her descendants, to her children. So the detail of the ksuba is benin dichlin, which is what her children get, they shouldn't suffer from the Isra she did. Kamash Malam, that's the chiddush of the Mishnah here, that none of the ksuba is applicable, and even the children don't get either. Then the Mishnah said, when it comes to this woman, so if the husband passes away, the first or second husband passes away without any children, so the first and second husband have to do chalitza, but not yibum. So the Gemara explains, the brothers of the first husband, so chalitz midayraisa, they have to do chalitza minatayra, because she's really his wife. So her husband passed away without children, there's a mitzvah of yibum or chalitza really minatayra, so the chalitza is minatayra. V'loi miyabim. Now the fact that we don't allow to do yibum, that's midrabanan. That's a knas midrabanan because she went and had a relationship with someone else. That there's no yibum. Now when it comes to achiv shosheni, the second husband that died, so when it says in the Mishnah that the brothers of the second husband have to do chalitza, so really she's not even his wife. And really there's no chalitza at all. Chalitz midrabanan. So the second husband, so over here the whole chalitza is just a requirement midrabanan. V'loi miyabim, and there's no yibum here. Loi midaraisa, v'loi midarabana. Minat Torah, there's no requirement, not for yibum, and not for chalitza either, really. And midrabanan, you can't do yibum either. But chachamim v'geiser, that she cannot go out without chalitza. Similar to what we learned before in the Gemara regarding a get, that she would need a get from the first and second husband, even though to the second husband she should not need a get, she was never married to him, but because it will look to people like she was married to him, so they require a get. Similar over here, Chachamim required chalitza.